Well, I'm proud to say that my book, Kiss and Make Up with Your Thyroid, is now officially launched. We had a launch party last Thursday night. We had lots of people here having fun, hugging, laughing, sharing thyroid stories, talking about thyroid health awareness. I've just been looking at all the photos, so I know all that went on. It was super fun, went very quickly. And so I want to thank all of you that came. And I know many of you that listen all around the world or all around Australia, and so couldn't come, but were with us in spirit. So thank you for all your support. It really does mean a lot to me. I'm just thrilled that the book is now launched, that people are starting to get it, read it. I'm getting some fabulous reviews on Amazon, so check them out if you're not sure whether this book is for you. But essentially, if you're listening to this podcast, the book is for you because you're interested in thyroid health, and that's what the book is all about. It's focused in on how to live a thyroid-friendly lifestyle, so all the diet and lifestyle things that we can do on top of taking medication if we need it, so that we just feel great and not just sort of plugging through each day. So that is the book. You can get your copy on Amazon, or you can get it directly from me on annabellebateman.com if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But make sure you get your copy or buy one for a friend. There is the thyroid box as well, which is super fun. It really is my crowning glory, I guess, in this whole project, because it's got so many practical tools to set you off on your thyroid journey. And it's got some really fun things just to make you feel good. Now, let's dive into today's episode for the podcast. I'm talking with Sophie Shepherd, and we're talking about all things hormones and thyroid health. So things like cortisol, insulin, estrogen, progesterone, thyroid hormones, obviously. We talk about gut, brain, anxiety. We talk quite a range of different things, and Sophie has Hashimoto's herself. So she shares her story with us. So I want to introduce you to Sophie. She is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She is the creator of She Health Experience and She Talks Health. She's got a podcast called She Talks Health Podcast. We both like to talk. That's why I'm a bit getting my tongue twisted. This is Let's Talk Thyroid. Her podcast is She Talks Health. She Talks Health everywhere on all social media platforms, so go check her out. She's a women's period and gut health coach on a mission to help women reclaim their hormones as superpowers and not let them get in the way of feeling sick and miserable. She has a test, not guess, philosophy in her approach, and we talk a bit about that. She's very focused on finding root causes and diagnostic testing, nutrition and lifestyle, just so women can reclaim their lives, feel empowered, educated, and just get on with living. So enjoy this episode. And if when you get to the end or part way through, you think, oh, my mum would like to listen to this, or my sister should hear that, or my best friend, why not share the episode with them? Just the individual episode. That can go a long way to both spreading the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast and getting it into the hands or the ears of those that really need to hear the messages here about thyroid health. And it's just going to help them with their particular health. So I'd love you to share the episode with someone who needs it. Of course, like, subscribe, comment, all of those things help deal with all the dreaded algorithms that exist across social media, and just the more that we do that, the more it helps get the message of thyroid health and the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast message out to everyone else. So sit back, enjoy this episode, and love to know what you think. Well, welcome, Sophie, to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. This is going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to getting to know you a bit and your story, and hearing your views on all things thyroid and hormones. So welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Thanks for having me. I love talking about hormone health and thyroid health. It's like basically something I talk about every single day. So why not talk about it while it's recorded?
Absolutely. And I love, you've got a podcast called She Talks Health.
Yeah.
And my podcast is called Let's Talk Thyroid. I thought I'm going to muck that up in a sec. So, as I said before, we obviously both like to talk. So, and talk about obviously health and well-being and wellness and all of that. So, I thought that was kind of cute and looking forward to talking. I've never run out of things to talk about with any podcast guest. So, I can't imagine that we're going to have trouble really exploring some of these interesting connections between different hormones. Yeah.
We could be here all day.
Yeah. Well, we won't be, because I know if you're listening, you don't want to be listening to us all day. And so we will keep it on topic. So, Sophie, would you mind starting just telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do? And I know you've got your own thyroid story, so we might delve into that after a brief, tell us a bit about you.
Yeah. Well, yes. So I own She Talks Health, and the She Talks Health podcast is my baby. And I did get into all of this because of my thyroid story, so we can loop back into that. But right now, what we do is I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. So really a women's health focused practitioner. So I would say the trio that we work in is anxiety, gut health, and thyroid/period health. So just like hormones, gut, anxiety, and how it's all connected. Because most of the women that come to us are dealing with weight gain, brain fog, fatigue, depression, anxiety, hair loss, acne, painful periods, irregular periods. They're kind of all over the map. And what I've found through doing this work is that the whole body is connected. And so if we can really look at the root causes of what is causing these hormonal, brain, and gut issues, we can really piece the puzzle together. So that's what we do, with our clients inside the She Health Experience, inside She Light, inside She VIP, and inside She Lux, which are all the programs that I offer. I mean, we like to take a pretty comprehensive approach. So it's similar, I would say, to functional medicine, where people are running those functional labs and they're piecing things together and giving you a protocol. We definitely lean into that. But at least in some of the more, I'd say, in-depth programs that we offer, we really believe in mindset work, energy work, emotional health. It's so much bigger than just, here, take this supplement. And I think that we can get kind of stuck in that. So we really try to bridge the gap. And that's why I have a womb healer on my team, and I have an emotional eating psychology coach on my team. We're always just looking for innovative ways to support women in their journey. And we also have just all the free stuff on the podcast and the blog and Instagram and everything.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot going on. Yeah. And that's what
we have a lot. We're like, I'm on a mission. Like, I want to impact women all over the world and empower them about how their body and their hormones can work for them and not against them.
Absolutely. And I think that's, one of the things that I love about talking to other people working in this sort of space is that we often do tend to be pretty passionate advocates for health because we've lived through it and wanting to see women around the world not suffer in ways that they don't need to, or maybe that we have. So all that sort of shared mission stuff I love it. And at the end, we'll definitely talk about how people can connect better directly with you. But so tell us, Sophie, a little bit about your thyroid story. How were you? Where did it start? Just give us the nutshell.
Yeah, so this is where we get to kind of intertwine, I think, all the stress and the gut health connection, because your thyroid doesn't just stop working one day, right? Like, I've learned this over time. It's funny how we start to label, I have Hashimoto's, I have hypothyroid, I have Graves', I have hyperthyroid, whatever it is. But it's like, but our body had a lot going on before that diagnosis. So for me, my journey started when I was a teenager. I had some emotional traumatic things going on when it's just in like the first time I started dating somebody. We won't go into all that, but
that's okay.
Some things that happened, and right around that, I would say anxiety kind of kicked in, and then I had gut issues like crazy, and by the time I was 16, I had done a scope in both ends. been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, which I always like to say, if you just remove the I, you have BS, and that's your diagnosis. It's just not a very helpful thing to be told, because there's, quote, nothing you can do about it, which of course I would argue until my dying breath that of course there is, and I reversed it. So when I had the IBS, or quote IBS, all through high school, I was just a mess, with anxiety, with gut issues. And then when I turned 22, I think 21 or 22, is when I got diagnosed with hypothyroidism, which I saw you were too.
Yeah.
And I really attribute that to, the three pillars of autoimmunity being leaky gut, genetics, and a trigger. And my trigger was again, unfortunately, another ex-boyfriend, and a really abusive situation that I found myself in, emotionally abusive. And it just toppled me right over. And I had all these, the anxiety, and I had all these gut issues. And I'm so sorry if you can hear that dog that's in the hallway. But when I turned 22 and this stressor of this person came into my life, that's when all the classic hypothyroidism symptoms came, only I didn't know what that was. I just thought, oh my gosh, something terrible is happening to me. Like, all my hair is falling out. I've gained like 30 pounds. I'm so exhausted. I can't even pick up my handbag without feeling like a huge weight, and all this stuff. And I couldn't really work. And it was just really debilitating. And I got really depressed, which was new because I'd really been more on that anxiety scale. So just classic hypothyroid symptoms. And that's when I went to the doctor and went to my primary care physician. And like so many of us, I was told, a lot of medical gaslighting occurred. I was told, this is probably just depression. You should just go on an antidepressant. To which I said, look, I feel like I'm 80 years old, and at last time I checked, depression doesn't make your hair fall out. So can you please run a full blood panel, right? And I didn't even know to ask for a full thyroid panel at that point. I just knew that there was something wrong, and that surely she had to find something in my blood work, right? Like, surely there had to be something.
Yeah.
And she reluctantly did. And she looked, and I would say luckily, have elevated TSH. And I say luckily because not so many of us get misdiagnosed, or it takes forever to get that diagnosis, because conventional medicine is waiting for that TSH to go above a certain level. And so I think my TSH was like a 6 or a 7 or something. So she was like, you have hypothyroidism. Hooray. We found the thing. And like, here's the medication,
So did she test the thyroid antibodies at that point?
No. So this gets really good. So I have glasses for anyone who's listening to the podcast and not seeing my face, but I have glasses. So I 6 months later, I go back to her and I'm like, oh, I must just need a new prescription. Like, just like my glasses, I need more, right? And she runs my TSH again only. And she's like, oh yeah, your thyroid's normal. There's nothing else I can do for you. And I said, at this point, I had done a lot of research. And I was like, well, what about a full thyroid panel with antibodies and reverse T3 and all this stuff? And she literally said to me that I was making things too complicated.
Oh, wow.
So I fired her. So I was like, okay.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Gosh. If it wasn't such a common story, you'd think, oh, you're really unlucky.
I know.
But it's such a common story. Oh, it's just, yeah.
And, my thyroid clients always ask me, because they go through what I went through, which was just despair and disbelief and frustration at the medical community. And I always just say, look, their tool set is limited when it comes to thyroid, and they don't care if you have Hashimoto's, because to them, the treatment plan is the same. You go on Synthroid. But we know in the functional medicine world and functional nutrition world that there are so many other tools that we have. And so I just didn't like that answer. And I thought there's got to be a better way to feel. And I just went on a journey, and I found a functional medicine doctor within 6 months. And he was the one that tied my birth control and my gut health to my thyroid, and was just like, here's what you need to do. And, and things healed up very, very fast for me after that.
Oh, great. Amazing when you're actually doing, maybe taking that holistic approach and doing the things that, as you say, in the functional health space, we know that it works. Yeah, your body responded really well. That is great. Yeah.
I was very fortunate.
Yeah. It's just that whole medical, gaslighting experience. It hasn't been my experience, so I am grateful for that. But such a common experience. I mean, when I was diagnosed at 22 too, different sort of backstory, but my TSH was 185. You're like, I don't know how you're kind of still alive.
How are you standing? Yeah, wow.
So I think, my thyroid was burnt out very early on. And so, yeah. So I just think, oh my gosh, that is, I mean, what I know now, like, that is completely crazy.
So I didn't have
any trouble. So I didn't have any trouble being diagnosed, although initially that was a primary hypothyroidism diagnosis. I've sort of gone back and looked at all the blood tests, and that was in 1996. So, a lot less was known. And so it was quite some time after that in my records, I've got antibody tests. So I don't remember at the time, but I think it was just so bad that, and back then no one was really talking about all of the holistic stuff anyway. So, I feel a little grateful that I haven't gone through all of that, but I know so many people do. And and you sort of wonder if now it would have been different. I don't know. I mean, you never know, do you? Everyone has their own journey, and but I think some
people get lucky, like you did, and a couple of my clients have, but unfortunately, I would say the vast majority are still getting a lot of gaslighting and issues. So
look, and I think the more that people like you and I are talking about thyroid awareness and advocating for your own health and asking for the full thyroid panel, and if the doctor really won't order it, you can do it privately. And I don't know the cost of that in the States, but here in Australia it's a couple of $100, so it's not extraordinary. Like, obviously it's better if you can get it through our Medicare, but anyway, our health systems are quite different. But if we can get it through free through the government, fantastic. But if you can't, it's not beyond it's not thousands of dollars, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I know money, is tight for a lot of people, and I'm not suggesting it's not insignificant, but it is probably worth it. If you really can't get your doctor to give you a referral, go to a naturopath, a health, someone who can, in that functional space, that can refer you for a full blood panel, or just do it privately, because it's worth knowing, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think knowing more information is always helpful, as long as our nervous system is ready to receive information about our bodies. And I think that, that's how we make steps forward. It's how we become empowered, is with education and information. And luckily it isn't so expensive, relatively speaking. So it is possible to get, and it is something you can get in the States. You can go to ultalabs.com is one of the options, and they just let you create your own account and run your own lab. So yeah,
great. So one of the things, Sophie, you said that was part of your the root cause was, well, I don't know, actually you didn't say this was the root cause, but one of the things you think was at play was birth control, and obviously that feeds into hormones, which is what we're going to really dive into, is this connection between thyroid hormones and all the other hormones that are racing around in our body, and trying to understand the connections between all of them. So we might come back to the birth control and period connection, but can you just start off by giving us an overview of which are the key hormones at play when we're talking about thyroid health?
Yeah. There's so many hormones in our body, and our hormones are running the show, right? They're in charge of our menstrual cycle, our appetite, our weight, our sleep, our response to stress, our blood sugar, digestion, our mood. There's all these different glands, like our hypothalamus and our pituitary and our thyroid and our adrenals and our ovary. There's so many different things to think about, right? And I think it would be ridiculous to say that we even probably know all the ways that our body works. But I would say the biggest connections I see are between cortisol and insulin and their impact on the rest of our hormones, including thyroid, and then The thyroid's impact on estrogen is pretty potent, I would say. So they are pretty connected. And I find that if you can work at the top level, you can support everything downstream. So that you're really looking up at the root cause of what could be going on that are causing potentially the thyroid issues to begin with, and how that's impacting your symptoms, etc.
Okay, so maybe can I get you to explain sort of the role of each of those hormones to start with? So just so we're all clear, because I know we should know, like I feel like we all should know how about all these different hormones in our bodies, but I don't think I'm the only one that doesn't have a full grasp of that. So I don't know which one you want to pick first, but can we just do them one by one and then unpack it a bit?
Oh my gosh. And I'm so glad you asked, because I think we're not even educated about our own body. And I certainly wasn't. I mean, gosh, it's taken a lot of studies to learn these things, but we'll start with an obvious one. That's cortisol. So that's our main stress hormone response hormone, and its effect on the body. So cortisol is there for a really good reason. It's there, you might have heard, to help you to respond to danger, right? Fight or flight. And fight or flight being like in, many, many years ago, that would be how we could run away from a tiger or a threat. And that is great because it releases our insulin and our oxygen, and we're able to run away and fight back. But what we see in terms of how that can impact our body is that, especially with thyroid health, it will tell the thyroid to slow down. So if you ever get a full thyroid panel and you see, for example, maybe your reverse T3 is really high, that's like known, as your brakes on your thyroid. It's possible and probable that it's because of something that's releasing cortisol, something that's stressing your body out, and telling it, hey, slow down. And the reason it's doing it is not to mess with you. It's not because it wants you to. It's not because it wants you to feel.
Doesn't hate you.
It doesn't hate you. It's actually trying to protect you. It's trying to help your thyroid, to give the clue to your thyroid, hey, there's a threat here. We're going to have to expend more energy. Why don't we conserve the energy that we have? The impact, though, is that it can slow our thyroid down and we can develop hypothyroidism. So it has a negative effect to us, but it's our body trying to protect us. And as far as that also just impacting our cycle and things like, and just to bring it back to other hormones, stress and cortisol are going to tell your ovaries also to slow down. And your ovaries may not even get the cue to release and kick out the egg at ovulation. And therefore you're going to have low progesterone, elevated estrogen, and you're dealing with, oh my gosh, my period is terrible and painful and heavy, and I have more PMS and my breasts hurt and all these things. And you're wondering why. And I will tell you right now that cortisol will just disrupt your cycle, will disrupt thyroid. Every single time I have a client, I'm always looking at their stress levels. What's going on with cortisol? It's like, you can't skip that step.
Yeah. And I think we all assume that we live in this stressed out society. So it's just kind of normal, which has become normalized, but so much more important, isn't it, for those of us with, autoimmune health issues, chronic health issues. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just say this straight up. I get that. I'm a New York City person. I just moved to Denver. I'm from New York City. And so very high pace, very American, very like go, go, go. And guess what? That got me absolutely nowhere. That got me burned out, not able to function. And I'm pretty sure that most people listening to this podcast want to be able to do more than just function. They want to like thrive, in their health. And we can't do that if we're chronically stressed. So sometimes stressors come in and we can't do much about it, but we can choose how we're going to respond to it. And that is a lot. That is really important to master, is our mindset and response to stress, and getting ourselves back into that parasympathetic rest and digest part of our nervous system, so that the fire alarm gets turned off in our body and we can get back to regulation.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely.
that's a big one.
That is a bit. And look, I know we could talk for hours just on that, but so that's cortisol.
Okay.
Which one?
Next
Which one are we
hormone.
going to do? Next hormone. I know this is. I just want to do a bit of an overview. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say the next hormone is for sure insulin, especially in terms of
Mhm.
hierarchy. If your cortisol and your insulin are whacked out, everything else, including your thyroid, will be impacted. So
Mhm.
insulin's job is to keep our blood sugar stabilized. So when we eat food, any food, it doesn't matter if it's a carrot or ramen or ice cream or whatever it is, anytime food goes into our mouth, our body is going to release insulin. And that insulin is in response to the food. So the food is converted to glucose, and then the pancreas is going to release that insulin for us, and it's going to shuttle the glucose into the cell. So think of like the pancreas is like, I don't know, like the big house, and then it releases a school bus and the school bus comes along and shuttles that glucose into the cell. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
here's your energy. But when we eat too many carbohydrates, or in relationship to protein and fat, there's too many carbohydrates, our pancreas is going to release even more insulin because it's going to see there's even more glucose, okay? And when that happens and there's this gigantic push, what happens is we have a swift uptick in glucose and then a crash. And so that's why people
Mm.
laugh about being hangry. Being hangry is actually low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. And it's
Mm.
your body is literally saying, I'm starving, I need energy right now. Okay. And so what happens, unfortunately, is that we're like in a desperate place when we are at the bottom of that roller coaster ride of the blood sugar, and we need glucose quickly, and the body is smart. So it's like, gosh, I really have a craving for ice cream right now, or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden we're up at the top of the roller coaster, and then we're going to crash out. So you end up on this kind of roller coaster of blood sugar, and then that is going to impact our thyroid a lot. And then also stress will kick up our insulin as well. So
Yeah. And obviously, whilst we're trying to highlight hormones separately, we're such an interconnected body. So I know it's almost like asking the impossible, isn't it, to just pull one part out and highlight it. And I've read a bit about this, but something that I would like to delve into a bit more, just personally even, is that insulin thyroid connection, because I think if we don't have stable blood sugars, it really does impact. And so is it that it impacts thyroid production? Like, how does it can you explain how exactly it does impact on the thyroid?
Yeah, well, one thing, because we already talked about cortisol, is that it is very stressful in the body to have imbalanced blood sugar. So that's one of the biggest ways that I see that blood sugar and insulin issues will cause problems with our thyroid, because it's like, oh, danger. And so that is probably one of the biggest things that I see, honestly, in terms of how insulin and blood sugar will impact the thyroid. It's just yet another form of stress in the body.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So to keep it simple, that's probably what I would say.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, and it is. Yeah. It all. I suppose stress just is. That's the bottom line, isn't it? Stress. We always come back to stress. Somehow on this show, we always come back. To stress.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised, just because of the nature of talking about thyroid health, how important stress is to our thyroid. It's like just so paramount. It's crazy, and we just don't want to talk about stress. It's the thing. We're just
it's hard to. I guess it's hard to. It can be hard to deal with and know how to manage that stress. I guess that's often, we know it, but doing it is hard. Like I was thinking yesterday. So at the moment in my world, I've just released a book, and so I've got a book launch coming up in a couple of weeks, so that's really exciting. And we've got a federal election here coming up, and I'm a bit involved in campaigning for one of our local candidates.
Wow.
And that is a couple of weeks after the book launch. So it's just a busy month. Let's just say it's a busy month. And so yesterday I was at a breakfast, and then I had a podcast interview, and then had a few phone calls. I got to the end of the day and I was like, oh, okay, that was a lot. Because I mean, for the last year I've been writing my book. I'll come home, drop the kids to school, come home, write. It's fairly quiet, And so, and I and obviously with all the COVID things over the last couple of years, I've gotten not used to being by myself a lot of space. As much as I love chatting to people, I have, and I've also learned over time to not overschedule. But I thought, okay, this is interesting. I'm going to have to watch how I manage the next month, because I don't want to burn myself out. I don't want to fry my thyroid. I want to practice what I preach. I'm going to really have to think about how I plan out the next few weeks and keep all those balls going, or work out which ones are less important for that period of time. And so I haven't completely resolved that, but I think that's part of that, learning to manage stress, and not just say, oh, well, it's just going to be a full-on month. Well, yeah, it's going to be busier than normal, and that just is, but how do I manage that so that I don't then spend the next 3 months with my thyroid all out of whack and trying to recover?
It's hard. I mean, I struggle as a business owner as well to run all the things in my life. We're getting married. We moved across the country. There's business to, huge business to run, and it's just a lot. And I'm realizing as I kind of go through life that it's just so important, because like you said, you don't want to have 1 month of crazy high stress that stops everything else for you for 3 months. So, it's a balancing act, I think, for all of us.
That's right.
That's how I would say insulin really impacts, our blood sugar really impacts our cortisol. Cortisol impacts blood sugar, and then that will kind of mess up our thyroid pretty badly.
Yeah. And you said then that thyroid impacts estrogen. So can you explain maybe a bit about estrogen and that connection?
Yeah. Well, okay. So just before we talk about the impact on estrogen, maybe also just talking about what is estrogen.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry. Yeah, that completely. Yeah, no, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So I do think estrogen and progesterone are really important hormones, and they're highly influenced by our thyroid. They're highly influenced by stress and by insulin. So going down that line for sure. But estrogen is our hormone. There's a lot of different types of estrogen, by the way. There's like 15 different types, which is fascinating. Most people don't know that, but
I didn't know that.
I know. It's so fascinating. But there's different types. But a lot of people rag on estrogen, but I would just say it plays a huge good role in our body. It's like the va-va-voom hormone. It's like what gives us our lips and our thighs and our hips and our skin staying lubricated, right? Like, so when a woman's going through menopause and they're getting hot flashes and getting dry and they're having all these issues, right? It's because estrogen is going lower. And estrogen also helps us with our bone health. It helps even with energy. There's so many things that estrogen supports. Okay. And just like anything else, too much of a good thing can be bad for us. And so with when it comes to thyroid health and its impact on estrogen, it is multi fascinated. One of the biggest things that I don't know if anyone who's listened to this will appreciate or have experienced is that thyroid disease, both hypo and hyper, will disrupt ovulation. And that will equal a progesterone deficiency. So progesterone is like the opposite of estrogen. They work in relationship to each other like a seesaw. And in the second half of our cycle, after we ovulate, we want progesterone to be the dominant hormone over estrogen. But when we have thyroid disease, we can have this disruption in ovulation, causing progesterone to go really low and estrogen to be the dominant hormone. And
because we don't ovulate, sorry, is that because it might not kick? If we don't ovulate, then it's going to disrupt that balance. Is that right?
Exactly. So it all comes back I mean, it all really comes back to our brain too, because our brain is what tells all of our hormones to do everything, our pituitary and everything. But yeah, if we don't ovulate, we're not going to create adequate amounts of progesterone, and then we're going to have excessive estrogen. And that's where people feel like I have heavy periods, I have PMS, I have painful cycles, all of that, the water retention and the breast pain. So hypothyroidism can definitely cause an issue with ovulation. And then and then there's so many connections. Okay, so
Yeah.
one other one is that hypothyroidism will drop the body's ability to be sensitive to insulin, which is how it can be impacting PCOS. And that can also make estrogen higher and progesterone lower. It can cause, there's a lot of different ways. It can cause issues with detox pathways. So hypothyroidism, especially thinking about how hypothyroidism is like slow, right? When you were dealing with Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, you feel tired and sluggish. Well, imagine that that's happening at every single stage of your body. It's not just your fatigue and your cellular health, it's your liver and your gut. So that's why people with hypothyroidism also suffer from constipation often. Well, guess how estrogen gets out of our body? Through the gut and through liver. So hypothyroidism causes the liver to slow down. The liver is also where a lot of the conversion of hypothyroidism happens, and the liver is also where estrogen gets escorted out of the body. So that can cause a lot of issues with estrogen. Yeah, there's about a couple other ones, but those are the main ones that I see, and how it just really can mess up. Even getting getting pregnant, one of the first things that you'll find if you ever try to get pregnant is they're going to run your thyroid numbers. And if they're off, they're probably going to prescribe you levothyroxine or Synthroid, because they need you to be having a healthy thyroid in order for you to create and maintain a baby. There's a lot there. There's a lot there.
There is and I think that one of those, disruption to your menstrual cycle and infertility can be warning signs that if you don't know that you've got a thyroid problem, that you could. Again, they're another common symptom, aren't they, of hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, like maybe undiagnosed. So if your cycle is long and stretched out, it is longer, then that's a longer sign that everything's slowed down.
Yeah, it can be long. It can be kind of irregular, or heavy is another one, like heavy clots. Even maybe more pain if you do have excess estrogen. So those are, I do think we're lucky. I always come back to what's good about all of this. And I think women are particularly very lucky, because we do have a monthly report card, in a sense, with our fifth vital sign, which is our period. And how we are doing with our cycle, obviously before menopause, but how we're doing in our 20s, 30s, and early 40s can really show us how things are going. Even tracking your cycle with basal body temperature, if you're constantly under in your temperature, that is definitely a sign of hypothyroidism. So yeah, there's a lot of connections there, and ways we can learn about our body through our cycle, through temperature, through symptoms, that can help us on our journey to better health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, just understanding how our body actually works is really helpful, because then when you feel like something's not quite right, then you've got a little bit more of a ability to pinpoint where that might be, so then you can go try to get that investigated. And it does take time and experience to really learn to listen to our bodies, and then know what we're listening for, I suppose. But Sophie, you mentioned birth control quite early on in part of your story. How does that then impact, when we're talking about estrogen, progesterone, ovulation, thyroid health, and then if you throw birth control into that, how does that all work or not work, and what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, we need a whole other podcast. Yeah. So I wish I had my chart that everyone could see here, but it's on my let's see, it's definitely on the blog and it's definitely inside of my Instagram if you go back, but birth control flatlines our hormones. So in a normal cycle, kind of how I mentioned, you have these ebbs and flows, so that the ebb and flow is estrogen will rise. It's going to develop the start of the uterine lining and also be prevalent highest and highest amounts near ovulation. After ovulation occurs, where the egg gets kicked out of, that follicle is actually going to turn into the corpus luteum. That's going to create progesterone, and then progesterone takes over. So if you think of it as like waves, it's like estrogen kind of slowly rises, peaks, and then it's supposed to come down. And then progesterone is low all through the first half of our cycle. Then we ovulate, we have this huge amount of progesterone, and then everything falls out when we bleed and we shed and our hormones are at the lowest. So that's what it looks like when we're not on birth control. Now, when we're on birth control, we have flatlined hormones. So birth control does not have regular hormones. It has synthetic estrogen and a synthetic progesterone-like product called progestin, not progesterone. So it actually is totally different. So if you actually look at a woman's hormone who's on hormonal birth control, it'll look like they're in menopause on a Dutch test. It'll be flatlined, literally no activity, as if they're not creating any estrogen, they're not creating any progesterone. So yeah, that's going to really impact us. And a lot of women will say, oh, my cycle got better when I was on birth control. And unfortunately, that's a misnomer. So our periods, we don't have periods when we're on birth control. Now, you might bleed, and that's because women in the 50s thought it was very abnormal to not bleed every month. So when they were creating birth control, they put in the placebo week, which is actually just a withdrawal from those chemicals, from the chemical estrogen and the chemical progestin-like substance. And so you're having this kind of fake bleeding. And so that really impacts people's cycles. And then because progesterone and estrogen are cardioprotective, but they help our brain, they help our bones, they help our skin, our thyroid. There's so many things that they are supporting. Then what I see often is when women have been on birth control for a long time, they end up with a lot of these symptoms. I'm so sorry. Did you hear that?
No.
Okay, great. Let me pause 1 second.
It's okay. It's all right. It's the benefit of being able to edit things out. It's all good.
Yeah, I didn't put do not disturb on my thing. So yes. So it's really, it's a delicate balance, and when we throw something like birth control in, it can really flatline our hormones. It just does, right? Because the whole point is that birth control, most forms of birth control, are just stopping the communication between our brain and our ovaries. And of course, all of our hormones are, the initial place that they start isn't at the gland itself, but it's in the brain. So birth control is actually very smart in that sense. It's disrupting communication. And so that's how our hormones will be impacted. And then as far as birth control and thyroid, what my functional medicine doctor told me 10 years ago was, yeah, your birth control could be slowing down your thyroid production. So you might want to, consider if there's other ways of birth control that are not hormonal that could support you. And I had at that point done AIP, I had done all the gut healing, I had gone fully into the journey, and I was like, you're telling me that this little tiny pill I take every day could impact my thyroid? Okay, bye, see you later, I'll figure out another form, Yeah. And of course, these are all, that is, I don't know that there's a study that's like every single person that takes birth control, their thyroid is going to be impacted, but I will tell you that my clients with hypothyroidism, or my clients with birth control, who are on birth control, do seem on blood work at least to be functionally a little bit slow, more hypothyroid. So,
yeah. Look, as you say, I think that probably is a whole big, podcast topic, but I think it is an important thing. And I guess I'm on the other side of having kids. And so, I think, to go back, for me to go back in the podcast and, really kind of talk about that is important. I was on the pill for only a year, and it just messed with me. So I figured out pretty quickly, this isn't working for me. And this was before I was sort of real. I was on thyroxine, I knew all of the thyroid connections, but I wasn't taking a holistic approach to managing my thyroid health then either. But yeah, and I was like, this isn't working. I can't remember all the details now. I just remember that it wasn't. Don't think this is working for me. I think I'm going to have to find some alternative solutions, and if they don't work, that's okay. We can have kids. It's all right. So, I mean, in the stage of life for me, it was it was okay. Like it wasn't it sort of fitted in with kind of wanting to have kids anyway-ish. So, that sort of ish.
If it didn't work out and you got pregnant, it wasn't a big deal.
That's what I'm trying to say. And look, pretty much that's what happened for me. And I'm grateful. I didn't have trouble falling pregnant because I know so many people do for all of these reasons that we're talking about. And it wasn't like I fell pregnant immediately after I stopped taking the pill, but it wasn't too long after. So I guess I didn't really manage finding an alternative particularly well, but I wasn't that hung up. It was okay. It was that sort of stage of our marriage. It was all right if I fell pregnant. Like that was part of the bigger picture plan. It happened a little sooner than we had kind of ultimately planned, but that's all right. It all worked out.
I think it's funny how we try to plan all this, right? It's like, there's big things.
I know you can't plan it all. And then I've got to say, I mean, this isn't so much thyroid related, but ultimately the best birth control for us in our marriage was a vasectomy. That was like the ultimate benefit.
It's a great option.
It was 100%. Such a good option. And my husband completely agrees. I mean, he signed himself up pretty quickly after our third child.
No more kids.
But on it, no more kids. But that worked well for us. And then it wasn't on me, and I didn't have to sort of worry then about all of that, how that birth control would impact my thyroid and my other hormones. And so anyway, that's a whole other conversation, but I was very fortunate. Yeah.
And I think one other thing to note about birth control and thyroid is, our thyroid is a nutrient hog, right? Our thyroid needs so many nutrients to work, right? Like just all the things. It's like, give me all the food and I will perform for you. It needs all our B vitamins, selenium, magnesium, iron, iodine, zinc, right? Vitamin C. And a lot of those nutrients are also the ones that are depleted by birth control. So it's like you see that connection, and then birth control is also going to screw up our gut as well in a lot of cases. And so then that's going to impact our thyroid conversion. So it's I think sometimes lucky when we don't tolerate it, because it can sometimes really mess up people. Not every time, right? But sometimes when people stay on it for a long time, it can have a pretty profound impact on our thyroid and our overall fertility health, because we're just trying to come back up from all those disruptions.
And maybe if you're listening and you're on birth control, and like as you said before, Sophie, you tried all the other things, and then when you took that out, that was a big, made a big difference. So maybe that's something that's worth talking about with your doctor, with your whole, with your medical team, because that could be, there's always something, isn't there? There's always something else to try. I get that can be a really big deal. So I'm not trying to minimize that's not really significant. But definitely, as you say, like for you, at least in your personal experience and a lot of the clients you work with, it can be a bit of a game changer. So worth exploring if that's something you haven't explored yet as part of your thyroid journey.
Absolutely. And I remember feeling really overwhelmed. So for anybody who needs a resource, I have a lot. I have a course called I'm Off Birth Control Now What?
Great.
And it's like a very affordable course to help you learn how to track, but also, like just how to talk to the doctor and what do we, it's really important that you have those communications with your physician, and also have all this education so that it can be as smooth of a transition as possible. Definitely worth looking into.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes so people can easily find that. So that's good. So we've talked a lot about the hormones, and you said at the beginning there was a bit of like a trio that, the hormones, the the gut and anxiety, do we want to talk about those other two parts of the triangle?
Sure. Yeah, we could totally talk about them.
Tie it all
Again,
together. Yeah.
yeah, I would love to do that. I think that's important because a lot of, like I said, most of my clients are dealing with multiple different things. So I'm sure listeners are also dealing with a lot of different symptoms. Do
Yeah.
you have a specific question, or should I just go on my rant?
I do have a specific question actually, but then you can take it wherever, you would like. Starting with the anxiety part, how do you, and I know you've been talking a lot on your social media lately about gut and anxiety, and you ran a webinar or, workshop recently. And so I knew, and I was like, oh, this is a good, connection, and then tying it in with the hormones. But how do you, see, I think anxiety is something that I've only just realized in the last few years that I probably have had anxiety. So how do you explain anxiety, or how would you know if you were experiencing anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just speak from my own personal experience as someone who's had it for my whole life, it feels like. Anxiety to me feels like in my body a couple of different things. It feels like a racing mind or monkey mind where I have a lot of ruminating thoughts and I can't turn it off. Like I can't get things to slow down. I'm just worrying, right? Kind of this worry train that's left the station and won't come back, right? You can't seem to console yourself. You can't seem to slow it down or reason with yourself, even if it's some far-fetched ideas that are going on. So that feels like anxiety to me, but it can also look a little different for everybody. I would say I also see a lot of hyperactivity, right? So like the go, 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 racing and can't slow down, right? Coming back to that stress thing, kind of hyperactive. And it's like, whew, can you take a breath and just be present with yourself, right? And I would say in terms of symptoms, I also see it. I know we're about to talk about the gut and brain connection, but I would say a lot of people seem to feel anxiety either in their gut or in their chest. So like a tightness in the chest, or feeling kind of like butterflies in their stomach, or even worse, like loose stools. That's always been my connection to the belly, and yeah, that's how it feels in my particular body. But there's also a lot of different types of anxiety. I personally have been diagnosed with just general anxiety disorder and PTSD. So those two things kind of put me in a different category. Maybe somebody else is more like anxiety and they have also ADHD or OCD or all these other things. So I think it's always really important to get a medical opinion and diagnosis if you're looking for that.
Yeah, of course. And I think, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here is that feelings of anxiousness and, not the diagnosed anxiety. So there's that. You said before that, the gut brain, gut brain anxiety, brain. Explain all that connection for us.
Well, like you said, there's a whole workshop we just ran. It was 2 hours, so I'll try to keep it super high level. What we're finding is that the gut and brain are intimately connected via several mechanisms, one of which you might have heard of is the vagus nerve. That is actually a nerve that you can see, and it goes in the back of your neck and all through your body, and a lot of the connection points are through your belly. And they believe it's like a super highway of connection. And we know that our brain talks to our gut and our gut talks to our brain bidirectionally. So it's not just one way, which is completely wild. We know things like 95% of our serotonin, our happy neurochemical, is made in the gut. They're still trying to figure out how that serotonin actually gets into the brain.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, they say, I think the last research I saw was that the molecules are too big, so they're trying to figure out how is it getting smaller and getting into the brain, like what's the connection. We know that. We know that our gut microbes actually will, certain strains can, like I said, produce serotonin and other neurochemicals. We know that inflammation, which is primarily beginning in the gut through things like poor food choices or chemicals or pesticides or gluten, things like that that can cause leaky gut. And I can explain what that means if we need to go into that. They can seep through and cause inflammation in the immune system and in the bloodstream. And one of the places that will go is back up to our brain, causing depression and anxiety. So we know there's a direct cause between the bacteria in our gut translocating, causing inflammation and going up to the brain. And I would say the other direction, like I kind of mentioned, that I see a lot is that our brain might either hold, like make our body feel unsafe and we hold, and so we feel constipated, or the opposite. It's like, oh, so nervous and everything kind of comes out, which has always been I always leaned more towards IBS-D than IBS-C.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are just like some of the ways that they're so connected. And if we have bacteria that is not friendly in our gut, that's overpopulating, yeast, parasites, anything that's causing tears in our gut and imbalances in our gut, it can cause just widespread inflammation. And one of the places it can show up is in our brain. And there's a new phrase out, which is kind of scary. It's, leaky gut, leaky brain.
Yeah, I've heard of that. It's pretty frightening, isn't it?
It's pretty frightening. But there's also, I think with everything that's kind of coming out, there's also solutions, and that's where I like to focus. Is like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So how can we support this and support not having a leaky gut and a leaky brain? How can we have an intact gut and an intact brain?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are many methods. I lean towards testing your gut microbiome because you are shooting in the dark, then it's going to take you longer and it could have a longer impact on your brain. So I like the GI map stool test personally. That will screen for parasites, bacteria, yeasts, and just microbial imbalances, which will give you a lot. You can add a marker to it to see if you have leaky gut. And that really helps. And then from there, you can create a personalized protocol with your practitioner. Now, if that's not an option, you might try to look into things that heal and seal the gut. So maybe that's like your glutamines and your bone broth, things like that. Certain probiotics can be very helpful. I'll give a super quick plug to Microbiome Labs. They have a strain out called Zen Biome Cope is what it's called. It's bifidolongum is the strain, and they've done a lot of studies that have shown just what a positive impact it can have on our brain and depression, and it's pretty incredible. So there's a lot of things out there we can try. I guess I just feel like testing and not guessing is just the way to go, because I dealt with anxiety and IBS for 7 years before I finally, just paid somebody to help me. And then I felt better. Like I said, in 2 weeks and then 3 months, I felt like so much better from that approach. And so I just see people suffer for years and years before they can get real action steps, because they're kind of guessing at what they can do. But, bone broth, glutamine, probiotics, they can all be helpful options.
Yeah, so that's all part of the healing process. But as you say, I mean, and that's where I'm a big advocate for working with professionals and building a support team of a variety of, professionals and experts in different elements of thyroid health, I guess. So yeah, totally. Yeah. When you're being tested, then you can be more specific, then you actually know what you're dealing with. And I love that there are lots of fabulous people now around the world that you can work with. So
it's great.
I think that's
there's
good
a lot
advice.
of people. Yeah, there's a lot of people that need help, and you have a lot of options out there. And I don't know. I've seen people suffer for so long. So I think it's always a good idea to get clear on what your, unique pathway needs to look like, and what your care team looks like, because everyone's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it changes over time depending on where you're at in your thyroid journey as well, and your different needs.
Yeah,
and I think we have different tests too. I think some of the tests that you've got available to you in the States are a little bit different to here in Australia. So I think what I often recommend is for Australia anyway, because I think this is where we are probably a little bit different, is that if you go to a naturopath, they're often the ones that can refer to, these types of tests. I mean, doctors obviously have access to some, but I think the naturopath's slightly different perspective and we'll know the tests available to have in Australia, I suppose is what I'm saying. And then if you're listening and think, oh, that sounds like a good test, maybe just check in Australia with a naturopath as to, or what the equivalent is here, because that's not my space, but I know that's who you would go to.
Yes, exactly. And I've had some consults with people from Australia, and it's been great, like, to work with them and their naturopaths. And there's definitely lots of labs out there. So there's lots of options. And I was just going to say, there's one other thing I would say in terms of this connection that's been really helpful is, like, any sort of breath work and or tapping, EFT, you ever talked about that on the podcast?
Yeah, I've had Brad Yates on.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you want to know more about EFT, go back and find the Brad Yates episode. It was a while ago. Yeah. But yeah, he's amazing. So yeah, EFT is great.
EFT, there's even a new app called, I think, Nerva. That's like the IBS, support through the nervous system. So it's, I think we have to work on both and the mind, the nervous system, and the body, right? Like, if you just deal with the gut, you might have recurrence of issues. So it's a lot of belief work and balancing of the brain chemicals, but also supporting any overgrowths in the gut. And some of my favorite tools have been like tapping and meditation, affirmations, breath work, that kind of stuff. It's been really helpful too.
Yeah, that's good, because we need to have those practical things to do, don't we? It's all very well to say work on mindset or I don't know, just go meditate, but how do you do that? So I think that that's really helpful.
Just go meditate. It's fine. It's like, I'm really like, you're okay. I'm not going to do that. But I like that we're living in a digital age in some cases, because we have access to these things that are already pre-recorded that we can just hop into for even just 3 minutes and drop our nervous system back into that parasympathetic, that rest and digest place. And not in that kind of fight or flight place. So I like to do things that are like, going to move the needle quickly. And that's a big one. And I think our mindset is another big place. Like, how do we view our body? Do we view ourselves as someone who's in a sick body? Are we always going to be sick? Like, all these internal things. Because I know for me with Hashimoto's and IBS and my internal mindset was not good. And so for me, working on my physical health first helped me to then be like, okay, I can get better. And then my mindset contributed to that. I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it to support this connection.
And as you said, I think as we sort of wrap up everything, if I've got something from this, I've got lots of different, learnt lots of different things in this conversation, but we're so interconnected. It just all interconnects. So I'm just wondering, Sophie, is there something that I haven't asked you that I think in the context of this conversation you think the listeners might benefit from knowing, or, something that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, yes. Just a lot of positive intention and empowerment. I have personally overcome Hashimoto's, IBS, SIBO, ovarian cysts, horrible periods, Candida. I mean, you listed out, I've probably had it, and the human body is pretty amazing given half a chance. So I think that if you're feeling discouraged at all in this journey, there are so many ways to plug in, and it can feel sometimes overwhelming, like, well, where do I start? But if you work with a knowledgeable person and just follow your intuition, I think you're going to get pretty far. And I always say, when all else fails, start with the gut. You cannot go wrong if you start with the gut. All disease begins in the gut, so start there.
Excellent. That's great. And Sophie, how can people get in touch with you, follow you? I mean, I'll make sure I've got lots of links in the show notes, but where would you like people to go and connect with you?
Yeah. Well, I would say everything is She Talks Health. So if you're an Instagram person, I'm at She Talks Health. If you want to look at the podcast, have some helpful things on there, it's also She Talks Health, and the website is also She Talks Health. So it's pretty easy to remember.
Perfect. Good branding. You've got a good branding strategy. Very good.
Yeah. It's like easy peasy, right? Like I can't remember
Easy.
the links. And then I can send you that birth control resource. I also have a thyroid resource that I can send you, and a thyroid masterclass too. So there's a lot of we just try to create as much free and low cost information and education as we can. And most of it, all of it can be found on our website. And if you're looking to work with us, you can shoot me a message on Instagram, or you can apply to work with us on the website as well.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sophie, for your time and your knowledge. And, I kind of sensed even from just our earlier Instagram, chatting that you're definitely a high energy, positive person, which, as you say, goes a long way actually in living with a thyroid condition, is to try to, is to do that. But I love all the energy that you brought to this conversation. So thank you, and I wish you all the best for all of the good things that you're putting out into the thyroid health space, and the health space more broadly than just thyroid. So thank you.
Well, thank you for asking me on. I hope this inspired at least one person out there. That's the whole goal of doing a podcast.
Absolutely. So. Yep. One person. Yep. Completely agree. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. I would love it if you enjoyed it, if you would hit subscribe and the bell. That would be really helpful. Even more helpful, actually, would be to share it with someone else who you know has thyroid issues or you think would benefit from listening. That really is part of my mission, I suppose, is to spread the message of positive and practical approach to managing your thyroid health so that people really kind of have more energy to get on with living their life and not just kind of trudging through each day. So spreading that word really genuinely helps other people feel better, live better, be better. The best way that you can connect with me is through my website, which is annabellebateman.com. From there, really, you'll be able to connect in all the other ways. I would love it if you would join my Facebook community group. There's lots of great support there. It's all free. That's just being with like-minded people. But from the website, you can also book a strategy session with me. So if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, not too sure where to start, then book a strategy session. There's also freebies to download and links to look at my online courses or purchase some essential oils or my cookbook. So that's really the hub, would be annabellebateman.com. But look forward to connecting with you and just being in this thyroid health journey together. Have a great day. Bye.
The information presented and discussed in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease and should not be used as a substitute for proper advice from a qualified professional.